Welcome to Saving America. This is Dr. David D. Schein, and this is our segment that we call Just the Facts. We have a terrific guest for you today. Let me just give you a brief summary of this person's incredible accomplishments. Ambassador Herman J. Cohen was the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs 1989 to 93. That was the George W. Bush administration. He was U.S. Ambassador to Senegal and the Gambia the Gambia coast 77 to 80, Senior Director on the National Security Council 87 to 89, a 38-year veteran of the Foreign Service. He is a renowned expert on Africa. Ambassador Cohen has received many awards, including the French Legion of Honor, and he is a member of the American Academy of Diplomacy. And he wins our award for the longest career of any guest that we have had so far on Saving America. Welcome, Herman Cohen.
Oh, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, we're just delighted to have you today, and we wanted to dig right in because there's so much to talk about. Can you comment for a few minutes, if you would, on the growing influence of the Chinese Communist Party on Africa, especially Central Africa, an area that needs development and support?
Well, China needs a lot of the commodities that Africa can produce, mainly minerals like cobalt, titanium, iron ore, bauxite. China doesn't produce those products, so they need to import. So what they've done is made deals. They'll go to a country and say, okay, can you guarantee us 100,000 barrels of oil per day? And return, we'll do infrastructure for you, not for free. You know, we don't want to get anything for free. We'll pay world prices for the oil, and we'll give you soft loans, and we'll build bridges, we'll build highways, we'll build water systems and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a barter system, and they've gone very heavily into Africa, and the Africans have been very pleased to be able to sell their commodities and to get infrastructure. But there's been negative effects also. First of all, the debt that the Africans have piled up over the years to China is now pretty overwhelming, and many of them really can't afford to pay back. And secondly, the Chinese are not very good employers. I remember I had a student who went to Africa to study the Chinese, and she went to a Chinese factory there, and she looked in and she talked to the Chinese manager and said, why are you treating these people so badly? He said, oh, we treat them just like we treat our own Chinese workers in China. So they developed a bad reputation for the way they treat their own workers. And also, when they do a project, a lot of the Chinese who come in to do the project stay behind, and they open up retail and they import cheap Chinese goods. They undermine local initiatives, local manufacturing. So it's a positive and negative, but also I must emphasize the Chinese do not try to have political influence. They do not try to have, but when there's a vote at the UN, these African countries say, oh, the Chinese are helping us, maybe we'll vote on the Chinese side. So I would say that's the one major impact. UN voting tends to be pro-Chinese.
Now, what about the impact on the United States? Something that I've heard more and more in the last year or so with shortages due to COVID is that China may be increasing a monopoly position on certain rare minerals that are required for, say, our growing interest in having electric automobiles that have batteries with rare minerals. Does this represent a threat to the United States?
Well, so far I haven't seen it. I think most of the minerals you need for battery, and especially battery storage, you know, the wind and solar don't operate at night, or the wind doesn't blow all the time. So what you need is cobalt, you need titanium, and you need a few other minerals, and most of those minerals come from Africa. So we're not worried about supply there. For example, Apple, which has something called columbite and tantalum in every cell phone, they get it. They have a factory, a processing factory in Northeast Congo, where they get most of that stuff. So Africa's we're not worried about Chinese holding out on us, most of it comes from Africa or other friendly countries.
I see. Okay. Ambassador, I wanted to ask you about your latest book. Came out in 2020. Tell us a little the title of the book and a little bit about the content of the book.
Well, I had the feeling that we had such important relations with Africa, starting with the Second World War. You know, before the war, we just dealt with the UK and France and Portugal. But when these countries started becoming independent, I said, maybe we ought to tell the story of how the US related to these countries. And it's been very fascinating. First of all, in the Second World War, we needed Africa to get to the Far East. You know, the Germans had occupied all of Western Europe. So we built airfields in Western Europe, and the Africans cooperated with us. Also, the first uranium that was used for the nuclear weapon came from the Belgian Congo, which is crucial for us that the Nazis didn't get in there before we did to get that uranium. And after that, we said, well, Africa's countries are becoming independent. What should our policy be? First of all, we thought maybe the Cold War should be our policy. You're with us or you're against us. But thanks to a very far-sighted gentleman named Richard Nixon, who said, we can't have that policy in Africa. These guys don't want to join any bloc. Let's treat them as neutrals. And President Eisenhower agreed with that. And after that, we've concentrated almost exclusively on economic development. And it's been very interesting because it's been experimental. We've never done that before in the developing world. We've done it in Western Europe at the Marshall Plan. And we've been doing all sorts of things. And we've never really succeeded in what we've been doing until lately. I think lately we've been very more creative. We've encouraged Africans to invest in their own countries. If people don't invest in their own countries, you're never going to have development. And lately we've been giving them incentives. So I've told that story, how George W. Bush started PEPFAR, which is treating millions of Africans against AIDS, saving millions of lives. President Clinton started the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which says anything you Africans make, you can sell to the United States duty-free. This has been a tremendous incentive for them to start producing things, you see. And I remember when I was US ambassador in Senegal, the State Department said, think of things to do, you know, creative things. So we dug 500 water wells for villages all over Senegal, and they produced water and they started growing vegetables. So I think the story of what the US has been doing in Africa has been so creative that it's worth telling. And that's why I wrote the book.
And tell people the name of the book.
The name of the book is US Policy Toward Africa, 8 Decades of Realpolitik.
Okay, very good. Just want to make sure we got the title of the book in there. Copyright 2020 by Herman Cohen. And our third question for our segment of Just the Facts today, what's the best way for the USA moving forward to continue to maintain that positive relationship with the African countries, particularly in Central Africa, where most of the development still needs to happen?
Yeah, well, I think we're continuing to develop new policies. And I think former President Trump had a very good one. It was called Prosper Africa. And what he is saying is, we're going to have people out there in Africa looking for opportunities for US companies to cooperate or to have partnerships with African companies. And that's the way to make money. And that's the way to have more education and more health and more infrastructure and that sort of thing. And President Biden has picked up on that. There's an entire bureaucracy now that's out there in Africa looking for new possibilities. And for example, in South Africa, we're producing automobile parts. And a lot of companies that make automobiles for selling to the US, because everything coming in is duty-free. Mercedes-Benz, for example, produces automobiles for Canada in South Africa, Canada and the US, because they come in duty-free. So it's a whole question of private investment is now the key. And we're pushing that very hard.
Well, that sounds very exciting. If our audience today would like to learn more about you, what would be the best place for them to go to get that information?
Well, Google is always very useful, but I wrote my earliest book, which I wrote in the year 2000, was called Intervening in Africa, Superpower Intervention, Superpower Peacemaking in a Troubled Continent. And that sort of tells the story of my career. And I would highly recommend that first book.
That sounds fascinating. Ambassador Herman Cohen, thank you so much for being one of our special guests on Saving America. And this is Dr. David D. Schein. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today.